Hello folks, this is Laren with Fantasy Grounds Academy. Tonight I am going to preview the Meanders 5 map series Orcs by Kris McDermott. He has released his latest edition of the Meanders map series. This is recently finished on his latest Kickstarter. I don't know when he'll make these available for everybody, but for the time being, this was a Kickstarter thing. I'm going to show it in Fantasy Grounds, among some other things, to enhance your games. I think Kris makes some of the best virtual tabletop maps around. He also makes them for other platforms, other formats, so take a look at his product. It's pretty good. I don't normally endorse people's product directly, but I've known Kris for a long time, and he is a very good friend, and he also has a lot of product. So hopefully this will help you if you plan on using orcs or any sort of goblins. I think this content will certainly make things a lot cooler for you. So what I'm going to do is first explain this process that I'm going through right now. So I'm in a fresh campaign of Fantasy Grounds. I do have a lot of content, but I don't have it loaded. So I'm just going to hit next on this pop-up screen. And what it's asking me to do is to set up the campaign. So I'm just going to use the SRD rules because I don't need a ton of content. I just want to use it for testing things out. So I'm going to immediately load the SRD, and then I'm going to import the assets that I've collected through Kris's Kickstarter. I went ahead and paid for the higher level so I can have the assets, the maps. It's got war machines, all sort of cool stuff. It also has heraldry. There are some furniture pieces. There's buildings. There's large scale area maps. There's smaller situational battle maps. It's really cool. So I just have the SRD, the data, and the magic items loaded. And one other module I want to load, just so you guys are aware of this. If you ever use orcs, goblins, or anything like that, there is a book that came out a couple years ago, almost 3 years ago. It's called Revenge of the Horde. It was put out by Nord Games. It is on the Fantasy Grounds store. Anything I've talked about in this video will be in the links after the video. But I'm going to click on modules, and I'm going to look for that module. It's called the Horde. Revenge of the Horde. It's really good. It's basically a module that focuses on goblin kin. And it really does have a cool thing. So it's called Ultimate Bestiary Revenge of the Horde by Nord Games. I'm going to go ahead and load that. This is a module that I use from time to time because it has so many different varieties of orcs. There's like 3 or 4 different clan types and different situational things about them that are useful. And then they also have different NPCs within each goblin type. So this is a really good, thorough amount of information and detail if you ever want to use orcs or goblins or anything like bugbears, those sort of things. So that's something I recommend as a game master. And then, of course, I will be using Bernardo Hasselmann's tokens if I need anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and hit next and then finish. So if I go to library, I have my modules here. The only thing I have loaded right now are the supplement and the base core rules. So I don't even have the monster manual or the player's handbook or anything like that. I just have this one module, which you can get on the store, or you can also get the PDF. There's a PDF version on their website. I put all those links in the description. So all these things here are part of this module here. And if you click on this, these are all NPCs, and they're different types of NPCs that come along with this content. These happen to be items. This does have a few maps in it. There's some story elements for story hooks. There's tables, parcels. So this is a full-on supplement. It's written very well. It's probably one of the best things I've seen in a long time, and it's been out for a few years. So if you don't own this and you like orcs and goblins and such, I recommend it. So the next thing I do is go to assets. So this is where you're going to have to import or put in whatever content that you want to be used in your campaign. So I'm going to click on images. Right now I have a data folder, which is an upper level folder in Fantasy Grounds, but I'm going to make a campaign folder so that I can use it just within the session. And then later on, I might put it in the data folder so that I can access it regardless of what campaign I'm in. So if you click on folder on the bottom, it will open up a folder. I don't think it's displaying on the screen, but it opens up a folder to your hard drive in that campaign folder under images. I have a folder and a group of folders that I've already organized for this particular set of tokens and modules and that sort of thing. In this case, they're maps. I'm going to paste it into that area. And once I do that, it'll create a subfolder. So when I hit refresh on this assets window, it's going to create a folder called campaign. So when I hit refresh, it will look through my directories. Fantasy Grounds will check to see what I have available, and it will scan through all the different files that I've added, and it will make it available in this campaign. So that's the first thing you need to do after you organize the content, is copy and paste it into either your data folder or into the campaign folder that you're working in. So you have two places you could put it. You could put it in the data folder, or you can start a campaign and put it in that folder so that it's only available in this campaign. If you want it available in all campaigns, it has to be in your data folder. So I'm going to click on campaign. There is a subfolder here called Orcs Meanders. That's the folder I put them in to organize it. When I click that, I have the Orcish item assets. I have some buildings, war machines, banners, and heraldry. I have the actual maps, and then I have these large battlefields. So there's a lot of different content in here that are available through that Kickstarter. I don't know when he'll make this available to the public, but he usually does after a few months of releasing the Kickstarter. So if I open up this is going to give me access to the little tokens and the things that you can use as placeables on a map. So you have lots of different furniture, buildings, cages, barrels, that sort of thing. If I go to the war machines, there are different types of siege engines, chariots, that sort of thing. Things that you can add to your map to make it look more interesting, or you can make an NPC and put these in your tokens folder and resize these to be used for tokens for your vehicles. And then in the Orcs Meanders area, I also have all the Meanders maps themselves, which are the main part of the Kickstarter. So if you click on that folder, I am using the medium-sized ones with no grid. So if you want to cut down on the size, but you still have a pretty good quality, the medium quality pictures that are in the actual Kickstarter are decent for Fantasy Grounds Unity. He has a small version, a medium, and a large. He also does other sizes and formats for different virtual tabletop platforms. But this happens to be Fantasy Grounds, so I'm kind of showing you that. These are a medium quality map. They are definitely kind of big, but they're doable. I looked at the file size. Files are anywhere from 1.5 to about 2.5 megabytes, depending. And the dimensions on these are 2700 by 1800, so that's not too bad for dimensions. So I guess I'm going to click on one of these to just kind of see what we got here. So here's a fortress in the forest. So I'm going to double click that. There's a medium one. There's a forest tribe. So one will probably have different assets on it, or sometimes he'll make one that has different weather or different type of environment like snow or desert, something like that. So there's a swamp, tundra, wasteland. I mean, this is all different jungle terrain. So he makes them for terrain and for different types of situations. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this forest one. When I do so, you'll get a preview of the image itself. At this point, you can create an image record, which will send it to your images, or you can set it as a background decal if you want to just use it for like visual kind of flavor. So in this case, I'm going to create an image record. So I'm going to close the assets for now. And I'm going to go to the campaign area, go to images. So these don't exist in here yet because I haven't added them to the images area. So first thing I'm going to do is make a group. So if I'm going to use the drop down on the upper right corner here, click this green add category button. Right now it's calling it group 1, so I'll just hit the edit groups button, and I'm going to call this Meanders 5 Orcs so that I know which folder or which category it is. Once I've made that group, I'll click on stop editing, and now I have a unique group just for these maps. So if I want to, I can hit create image, and create image record. It'll send it over one at a time. Or if I wanted to, I can import all of the campaign assets at once. So that'll make it a lot quicker instead of doing one at a time. So if I close this and I click on create from campaign assets, I can do so and just click that. It gives me dialog that says, are you sure you want to import all the campaign image as image records? I'm going to say yes. And once it does that, it's going to pull over all of the content that's in that campaign folder in the images area over into this group. So that's kind of a way to do it all at once. But you need to make sure that they're organized first and that you have the file names set up and everything, all those sort of things to make it a lot cleaner and easier to use. So it's important that you have that kind of situated and that you have it set up to where it's going to make it smoother and easier for you. And now I have all the different images in here. Some of these I probably didn't want as map images because some of these are just tents and such. But there we go. We have this list here of all the different content. And there's 6 pages worth of stuff. So ideally, I probably should have broke this up into different chapters. But this brings them all over. And then what I could do is reorganize them as I go. So these are just a preliminary thing. So once you've done that, then you can come through and look at some of the different maps. And here's your different situations here where you have the burned village. You have different variations of each. There's a desert tribe, forest tribe. So I was looking at the forest tribe. So let's open that up. And now that it's an image record, you can actually add line of sight, or you can place your placeables on it both if you want. So in this case, I'll leave this. I'm just going to say map. I'll just say village over here on the right, because nobody's really going to know what this is until they go in there. And then I'm going to turn off the identification. So when I share this image, it's just going to say village. It's not going to say orc forest tribe. That way, that doesn't give it away right away. And I'm going to resize the window. So it's important that you do this as you're working so that it pops up where you want it. And then I can unlock this map frame up here. And then I can use a drop down toolbar and then recenter, or you can right click, go to view, and then zoom to fit. So it's up to you how you want to do this. So I want to make this a little bit bigger. That way I can see what I'm doing. So we have that. Just right click, go to view, zoom to fit, just like that. And then use the mouse wheel to scroll in and out. So this is what the map looks like with nothing on it. It's just the raw image. I'm going to put some sort of grid on it. So if you know Kris's maps, he usually is in 50, 100, 140, depends on the quality of the map and such. But if you go over to the grid, we'll start with the 50 by 50, see what that looks like. If I turn it on, obviously you can see that's way too small. So if I go up to 100, what does that look like? Yeah, it's a little better. So 100 looks like it's a good happy medium. Now, if you notice, the grid is kind of gaudy. It kind of takes over. It's dominant over the image. So you can go to the tint of it and change the color. So what I might do is go to tint, take the eyedropper, and hover over one of these tints, and use that color as my grid color, and turn it down a little by turning down the alpha channel. That way it's not so obnoxious. There we go. So that looks pretty good. So this wall is 30 feet wide. You might be able to make it a little bit bigger, but I think these buildings are scaled for 100, so it looks pretty good. So you have a gate out here, and you have another one out here. So if you want to do line of sight on something like this, you probably want to set this up as terrain, because you have this wall here that you can't see over very well. And then you're probably going to make doorways for the entrance and the exit, or maybe these are both just ways in and out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and take this image and add a little bit of line of sight to it. It doesn't need a lot because it's not really a detailed dungeon map. I mean, you have this little layer up here where the orcs can walk. Then you have this wooden palisade, and you have a couple other platforms. So you don't really have to do a whole lot, maybe a couple of the trees. So this is a really simple line of sight thing to do. So first of all, we need to add in the wall outside of here. It doesn't have to be thick like it's showing here. You can just have a single line. So I'm going to go to the line of sight tool. I'm going to click on line. I'm going to click on the terrain tool. I'm just going to pick a point like in the center and just mildly click around. You don't have to have it perfect. You can just click in different areas and get the gist of the outline. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to have everything, every little single detail. This is just a way to kind of differentiate between the walls and the outside areas. And then you have these structures here. So I'm just going to click on here and come through. Just like that, like this, and just kind of very simply add a little bit of line of sight. And that's all you have to do. You don't really have to do anything too crazy. Using the arrow keys, I can move the map over as I'm placing these, because sometimes you have the window size too big or too small for what you're doing. So this is basically just a real easy, non-stressful way to add in line of sight. So all that's going to do is block the vision. That's not going to do anything other than that. The next thing I'm going to do is put in these doorways or walls. If you want to make any adjustments, you can click on the select tool. You can bring these points in if you want a little bit. You can make some adjustments if you need to. But really, it doesn't require a lot of work if this is all you're doing. So you don't have to stress out about it. It's pretty basic. There's no real rhyme or reason to it. Again, I'm doing, this is the Map Meanders 5. This is the Orcs campaign, that Kickstarter that Kris McDermott just put out. Just kind of checking out the maps and seeing what they look like in Fantasy Grounds. These platforms, you could also put, arguably you can put a little bit of terrain on here too. So if you wanted to do that, just go back to the line tool and just add in some of these points so that if an orc decides to stand on top of this and you're on the inside of the palisade, you won't be able to see up there. So that's kind of the reason why you do that. Otherwise, you just leave it alone. So this is just a way to illustrate the height in this particular area. So there you go. That's really all you need to do. Now I'm going to do the doorway. So here's the gateway. I'm going to move, oops, that. Control Z if you make a mistake. And I'm just going to move this up a little bit to put it more in the center. And check the other doorway too. I'm going to actually put the door in here. So this can go that. Not a big deal. And the only reason I put this point here is because I want it to be the edge of the doorway. Otherwise, I'll just left that straight through. So that's all we need to do there as far as the major points. And then what we could do is put these buildings also as solid structures, because you can't see through those. So if you want to, you can do the same for these buildings and for towers if you want. So if we take the line tool and go to wall tool, can click on these buildings, add a little bit of line of sight to them since they're really not open structures. And these give you kind of a rough idea of the shapes and the structures of the buildings. It's not really anything important at this point. So this is just a way to block for shadows and such. Really not going to serve much purpose other than, you know, making it so you can't walk through them. So that's basically all I'm doing right now. Just adding a little bit of walls for the buildings. Nothing big, no big deal, no stress. And you know, you don't have to go right to the edge. Just put it on the top of here, and that gives you the opportunity to apply it without having to have that much detail. It's really not necessary at this point to have all that much contour and such. So that's basically all you're doing, is just kind of lining out areas where either players can't just run through it, or it's going to block and make shadows. So that's all you're trying to do, is just kind of make that a thing. You can do that with these corner pieces if you want. So if I come up here, just kind of make something that goes like this, and then you can follow the contour that's already here, so you don't even have to recreate anything. That's just a way that you can block line of sight and make it to where people can't walk through this and they won't be able to seep through it either. So that's just a quick way to kind of make things a little bit more realistic, I guess. And I'm sure there's other ways you can do this, so I'm just going to use this corner here. Just double up on that. It's not going to hurt anything. Just using the points that are already there. Using this as a place to tie in line of sight. So technically, I probably didn't even need the wall there, but there you go. So there's just some basic stuff to do. Now, if you want to do any of the trees out here, you can use a terrain tool again. So terrain, just going to click a little bit inside these trees. I don't need to do all of it, just parts of it. This way, it will create the illusion that you have some line of sight. You don't have to do every single little bit of it. The idea is to block shadow, not the entire image. So these would be something that you just kind of casually put some line of sight on. You don't have to have everything perfect. So I might do this tree down here. So when your characters or when the players are on the map, you want them to be able to see part of the tree. You don't want to cover the whole thing. So that would be something like this. You have to have it perfect. So there you go. Not too bad. Pretty simple, not stressful. Have to have everything perfect. And if you need to move any lines, just go to the selection tool and move them. Just like that. So that's just a rough kind of preliminary. Now I got to make these gateways, so I got to figure out how I want to do this. So what I might do is put a solid line through here, a red line. We'll see how it goes. So I'm going to go ahead and add some doorways in here. So I'm going to take a rectangle tool, something like that, and put it in here. But I'm going to use, let me try to use the wall tool. I think that's going to work better. So I think what will happen is if I delete this line, it might delete some of this other structure. We'll find out. So I'm going to go to the door tool. I'm just going to make a door through here. So go to rectangle tool. And I'm just going to draw this in. See, it has all these points here, so I can adjust those if needed. That'll work. Do the same thing up here. This time I'm going to use the line tool, because this doorway is not perpendicular straight, so I gotta figure out how I want to do this. So it's like that, like this. It's like that. Now what I'm going to do is go in and fix these lines up a little bit. So I'm going to go to the pointer tool, drag these corners over to points they line up with. So we'll go there. Oh, that over here is in case. There we go. All right, so now we need to get rid of this line in here. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to or not. So what I'm going to do is take the line tool and I'll go into the wall tool, see if that will delete this line or not. So I want to go to the selection tool, see if that works. Nope, that's what I thought. So what I'm going to have to do is probably delete this out because I didn't do it right, but nonetheless, this will be something that you'll learn as you use Fantasy Grounds. That there's certain things you can go through that will work and some things that won't. So this is part of a bigger line, and it's a wall tool. So it's actually a terrain. So let's see if that does anything. I don't know if it will or not, but we'll find. The behavior of this tool has changed over the months, so let's see what happens. Yeah, see, it didn't work that way. So what you could do is put a point here. Let's see, if I go with a line, then select this area, and you can remove selected points, you can delete them, or you can simplify. Let's see what that does. Yeah, so that only removed the line. It didn't do anything. That removed that line. Yeah, it didn't do anything. So, see, if you delete too much of it, then it takes away the actual line itself. So you got to be careful when these walls that you're using the actual line of sight wall tool here for the actual area, because I think this one will work. So if I go to click this and move this in, that will line these up. See, now I have this green line here, which is part of this longer line. So technically, I'm kind of hosed this. So if I actually go to, see if I go to the selection tool, let's highlight that line. I can't just delete it. So that's part of the problem, is I don't have these doorways created properly. So I should have used the wall tool instead of the terrain. So that's all that is. So that's no big deal. So anyways, you put the line of sight on here, and then you come in and adjust for what you need to do. You take this doorway, for instance, and you can move it around if you need to. Like these points right here are going to be the death of me. I've already messed that up. So if I go to selection tool, see if I can delete any of this stuff. Yeah, see, it's not going to get rid of the terrain tool. Just got rid of the wall. So if I hit Control Z, that'll put some of the stuff back to where I had it. So that's just something that you have to get used to when you use line of sight and the terrain tool. You want to use the wall tool when you make your doors. So I use the terrain tool, which isn't right. Okay. So anyways, that is the basics of the sort of the things that you'll go through when you're going to build line of sight through Fantasy Grounds. You'll have to get used to the tool and get familiar with it. I haven't used it in a couple weeks because I just got done for eye surgery, but it's one of those things that, you know, you go into a project and you're not sure what you want and you get kind of distracted or up or something. So that's kind of what I've done here. So if you really wanted to, you know, redo it, you could. you can come back and undo the image. So I think if you go to the image folder and then find the one that we just edited. So let's see if I can find it on page 2. Should be a, let's see, this is the burned village. Here's the forest. Yeah, this is the one that we were working on. So if you unlock this and turn on the line of sight, you can still see it. So what you'd have to do is turn off the walls, or you can come back and re-add it. So you could take this, delete layers, and you could delete the whole thing if you wanted to. But that's not what I wanted. I hit Control-Z to bring that back. But technically, if you put the layer on the line of sight on a different layer, you can actually delete that layer. So that's basically what you do. All right, so let's take a look at another map. So that's just the tribal thing. Let's look at the mountain mine. See what this looks like. Oh yeah, this is pretty cool. So here we have Orcish Mine. Let's see. Let's go to line of sight. I'm going to right click and change it so zoom it to fit. So this is a pretty cool map. It's got some railroads on here. You can see there's some lumber here to hold up the ceiling for the mine. There's some walls in here. They're kind of hard to see, but they're there. And then you would just put a little bit of the wall tool in there. Maybe put a little bit of line of sight on this lumber. Wouldn't have to be anything spectacular because it's all indoor. Worry about ambient light. So that's a pretty nice looking map. Let's see what else we got. So here's the Permafrost. Oh, cool. So here's a village that has the Permafrost look to it. Let's see, right click, go to View, and then click on Zoom to Fit. Bring me to this. So that's pretty cool. So you got like this outbuilding, got some barrels, looks like some logs. Pretty cool. I like it. So let's use this. So I'll expand the map out a little bit. I'm just going to put a grid on it. So I think 100 was a good starting point. Yeah, that's really nice. And then I'm going to take and put a different tint on it. I'm going to use like a light blue and then turn the color down a little so it's not so bright, so visible. So there we go. There's our terrain. All we would have to do, honestly, on this map is just do red outline or the wall tool on these. So that wouldn't be that bad. So if I go to line of sight, take the line tool and the wall tool, I'm going to just kind of just casually click around the edges here. And all this is going to do is just block some of the light or the shadow coming from outside. Not bad. It's pretty basic. I mean, there's not a lot to this map, so this would be hard to put into Fantasy Grounds. All you're doing is just kind of clicking around the edges. You don't have to have it very perfect. A lot of people get wrapped up in that, and it's kind of defeating if you're having to spend more than an hour on doing this. It can take too long for just a map that you might use for 10 minutes. So you have to pick your battles when it comes to creating this content. So here's like the longhouse. So pick this and that. Just kind of add in some points here. Nothing major. Do the same over here. I'm going to add a war machine over here to see what those look like. Okay, so there we go. So there's just some basic line of sight. I'm going to mess around with the outdoor ambient lighting. So if you go to the line of sight tool, but then you go to lighting, and then you go to ambient lighting. Right now it's set to nighttime, I think, by default. So I'm going to go to dusk, and then I'll put a mask on it if I need to, but I don't. In this case, I don't. And then I got to go over here and into the play mode and turn on the line of sight and the dusk mode. So this is what it looks like, sun setting. Cool. And there's some shadow coming off the buildings. If you want to change the direction of the sun, you could do so by coming into the lighting tool, and then you can change the direction the light is shining from. So it may be casting into shadow or direction depending on what's going on. Maybe the sun's coming from the northeast area and it's shining through. You get these shadows. And if it's winter time, you can change the length of the shadow, so to make it a little bit longer. So if I go to like 10 or 12 or something, that's pretty good. Yep. So there we go. There's the shadowing. And then if you want to add, like, let's say you want to add an asset or something here, I'm going to first make this ridge kind of a terrain thing. So if I go to the line of sight and go to the line tool and terrain, all I'm going to do is just kind of click on this ridge and make this just an area that you can't see over. That's all that is. If you climb up on top of the ridge, you can be able to see if you open it up. So let's see what this looks like. Yeah, so there'll just be an area that you can't see over because it's up on a hill. So that's part of that. All right, pretty cool. Now I'm going to add a war machine. So we already added the assets to our folder. So if I go to the assets folder, and then I go to the campaign folder, and I'm in images, I'm just going to use a war machine for decoration, not as an NPC. So here are the war machines. I think I'm going to use this tusk wagon looking thing. And what I'm going to do is switch the map tool to the layers tile tool. And then I'm going to take the war machine, in this case, the tusk war machine. And what I'll do is I'll drag it into this folder here. Drag it to this little tile area. Take that, drag it there. And now you get an idea of the scale of this thing. So it's 11 by 14. That's huge. So I think I need to scale it back because that's a square on here. So I think I'm going to go with like 3 or 2, something like that. I think 3 look good. So it's 3 by 3 by 7. I'm going to flip it so that it's kind of at an angle. I'm going to click on the map somewhere and place it. So that's the actual war machine. And then what I'll do is go to the selection tool, just kind of move it a little bit. There we go. So it's on its own layer. You can move it if need be. You can hide it. So if you wanted to only show it at certain times, you can do that. So that's adding a different asset to the map. And I'm going to use one of the banners or the flags that he made for this. So the next thing is I'm going to go back to the Meanders folder that I created. And I'm going to go to the Orcish Banners. See what kind of banners we have. So it's pretty cool. So here are the flags, banner types. I'm going to use this one here, this angled Orc tribe banner. Kind of looks like it's sitting on you got like a pole if you wanted to, or you can hang this off one of the buildings. I think that's what I'll end up doing. But again, I want to make sure I'm in the tile tool. I'm just going to drag that over to this tile area so that I can add it. So I'm going to use this angled banner. And then I'll place it. So it's 8 by 4. That's really big. So I only want it to be like 1 square. So 1 by half a square, basically. And I'm going to click somewhere on the map, and it's going to show up where I want it. And I'm just going to attach it to one of these buildings. So probably one of these 3 structures here. I'll hang that flag there. I'm going to go to the layer selection and move it over to one of these buildings. And if you want to rotate it, you can. So I can take and just kind of rotate this over. There you go. And then if you want to move it without clicking to the grid, you hold down the right control key and you can move this where you want. So I'm going to place it a little bit higher up. Go. So there's a banner put on there. You could put the same banner if you want to duplicate it and put it on the war machine, you could. So if I click on that asset and I click on this duplicate layer, you can do that. So I just added another banner. I'll drag that off of here. It disappeared. It appears on top of the original asset. So I'll come over here. I'm going to rotate it. And then you can also flip it. So if you need to change the orientation of it or how it's rotated, just like that, that'll do it. So there's a flag also on the war machine. So these are just things that you can kind of place together. And then if you want the war machine and the flag to be one group, you can make a folder. And I'll put war machine so I know what it's for. It's a war machine. And then the banner flag that goes with it is going to go in that folder along with the war machine. So these 2 pieces are now one. So when I go to move that, it will move with it once I get it selected. So that's unlocked now. Okay, so now if I move this select it and move this as a piece, a whole unit. So you could do that if you need to organize assets so that they stay together. So then maybe you want to put a fire pit in the middle. Maybe we'll do that. So I don't necessarily have a fire pit, but I'm going to look and see if this Meander set has a fire pit. So if I go to the Orc item assets, I have them in a folder here. If you go and look through here, there's pits and tables and all kinds of stuff. So I want to look to see if he's got a fire pit in here. If not, I'm pretty sure I have some. So here's some torches. So technically, I could use this kind of like a fire pit. And here's a cauldron. So I think I'll use that. That looks pretty good. So again, I'm going to drag that onto the map into the tile asset area. So drag and drop that in there. There's the cauldron. It's 2 by almost 3 squares, so I only want it to be 1. I'll change that to 1. That scales it down. Just click in the center of the village somewhere. Just like that. If you want to rotate it, you can, so that the different things are facing different ways. Unlock it. And this should not be in the war machine folder. So now you can move this around. I can scale it up. So since I have it selected, I think I might go with 1.5. That way it's a little bit bigger. There we go. So that's a pretty good size cauldron. So this is just ways that you can enhance your village if you want to do this for your own setup. So that's pretty cool. So you got this little map here, add some assets and such, and there you go. So now if I want to populate it with orcs, let's say, actual NPCs, I do have a supplement loaded, and this module here is called the Ultimate Bestiary Revenge of the Horde. It's got some really cool NPCs. So if I go in here, there's a whole bunch of different gnolls and goblins and all kinds of stuff. There's the orcs right here. There's a whole bunch of orcs. So I can make a whole tribe or village of them. So I will go to the campaign area. I go to NPCs. And then what I'll do is I'll select the orc book so I can filter that out. And I just come down to the area or the location. I think it was page 2. So if I go to page 2, here are all the orcs. So what I might do is just create a couple different encounters, or in this case, yeah, these are encounters. So if I go to this encounter area, I'm going to set up a random encounter, which will actually be a scaled encounter. So I will click this random button. I'm going to use the drop down and click the plus button. That will create a group. I'm going to edit the group and call this Orc Tundra Clan or something like that. Not going to be a very big clan, but it's still going to be formidable. So now that I have that group made, I'm going to create this particular encounter. I'm going to drag over a couple of these orcs. So I have an orc archer, so I'll bring that over. Let's see. There's a berserker. There's a captain. There's a commander. There's a shaman. And then a soldier. So I think that would be plenty for this. Be a pretty tough encounter, actually. So now that I have that there, I'll just call this the Orc Tundra Clan. That will kind of give it a designator. So for archers, I'm just going to go 1d4, the most. For the berserker, I'm only going to put 1. They're pretty tough. Same thing with the captain, commander, shaman, soldier. I'll do 1d4, and that should take care of it. So that's pretty good size. I mean, that's really going to create problems for a party if they mess with if they're on bad terms. And I can set the faction, so these will inherit the default faction. So I'm going to make sure that these guys are either neutral or hostile when they start off. That means when you add them to the combat tracker, they'll be forced to hostile in this case. So they're not looking for any visitors. So that's how you can force that. But usually they're already set as an adversary. You just have to, if you want them to be neutral, you'd have to set them now. So at this point, when I click generate, it's going to create an encounter. So there's 3 archers and 1 of each. So that could be linked to the village and along with this random encounter. So you can use those later on in your adventure. And when you bring this up, you're going to have the ability to use this encounter. Or if you want to generate a new one, you could. So if I generate this, it made this a little bit tougher now. So instead of using that one, I could use this one. So I'll take that out. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So now that we have this encounter, then when I'm ready to run it, I can. So if I get this set up, go to the combat tracker, bring this over. Yep. So I'm going to theme the dice, kind of have this kind of brownish color. So if I go to the dice color and pick the color wheel here, or the color picker, I'm just going to pick one of these colors out here. So I'll use this thing here, and that will change the color of the dice. So it's kind of themed for the background here, and then I'll change the text to black. So it kind of gives the dice a little bit more of a themed color based on this village here. And then I will take this token and move it over, so I don't need that as much. This is the actual encounter, so maybe I'll put that there, and I'll put the randomizer in the center of the fire pit for now. Maybe not, because I might want to put some kind of flame on there, so we'll see. So now that we have that, I bring up the encounter. That's the randomizer, so I bring this up, send that to the combat tracker. They're all on there, and I can either set them ahead of time, or I can move them over as one group by dragging over this hostile button, and that'll put all of them on the map at once. Or if I go to menu, I can just delete all the foes, and I can place these ahead of time. So I'm going to put an archer over here, And I can place one over here, and I might place one over here on these porches, basically, so they have a better visibility. I'm going to put the Berserker guy right in the middle of the village, so that if anyone comes in there, he's just going to go nuts. The captain, I will put him in the center here, the map. The commander is going to be out over here by the war machine. The shaman is going to be also next to the boss here. And then the soldiers, I'm going to sprinkle them out. So there'll be one here, be one over here by the war machine, and a watch in the war machine. And then there will be one closer to the commander. There we go. And now when I send those over, they'll already be placed. I don't have to worry about where they're placed at. So go ahead and click the down arrow. And now when the party comes, they'll be ready to go. So you don't have to worry about it. So there's the Orc Berserkers. Now, if you don't like these tokens, you can always change that in your settings. But maps look pretty good with all these tokens and such. And if you wanted to put like fire pit here, you could do that. So if you wanted to make this look a little bit more, I guess, realistic, if you want to take the extra time, go ahead and open up this area for the line of sight. And if I go to the cauldron, I go to effects, and I'm going to add an effect layer. And in this case, I'm going to add, in this case, it's going to be water, even though it's not water. And it does it to the whole map initially, so you don't want that. So I'm going to put blur on. And I'm just going to reveal this area here that's part of this flame. You hold down the Alt key, kind of just trace around inside these areas where the flames would be. That's all I'm going to do. Just kind of make little areas here where the flame is showing through. And then I will take the droplet size, turn that down, turn down the speed just a little bit, and then blur it so that it looks more natural. It's not just... So it's the edges are blurred in more. It looks like there's heat. And then if I wanted to add smoke to it, I could. If I come to this, this is no longer going to be water. I'll call this flame. And heat. That's basically that is. And then here's the cauldron. So I'll move that closer to it. I think I'm going to put those in a folder since they're going to be related. So when I go to add a folder in here, I'll call this cauldron. So that way add these in. So here's that, and here is the cauldron itself. So they'll all be in the same folder. And I got to put the flame above the cauldron so that it shows. Now I'm going to add some smoke. So I'm going to add an effects layer. I'm going to add some mist. And you can see I don't want that all over the whole map, so I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to just trace an area where the smoke is going to be drifting away from the cauldron. So all I'm going to do is hold down the Alt key, draw area that I want the smoke to drift to and from. It's going to kind of draw it like a billowing cloud type thing. And you can see the line there. That's not what you want. So what I'm going to do is take that and blur it so it looks more natural. And I'm going to turn the speed down because it's way too fast. There we go. Yep. So now it looks like smoke coming out of there instead of a big line. So there's the mist. So that'll go inside the cauldron area. There we go. And then when you're done, you can lock these up so that you don't accidentally move them or break them. So now if you wanted to move the cauldron, all this stuff, as long as it's not locked, should technically move. So if you go to the layer selection, go to the selection tool, let's see, unlock it, grab this, and that most of the stuff should go with it, as long as they're not locked. So that's kind of a cool thing you can do. Fantasy Ground. So you add a little bit of realism. There's some smoke coming off the cauldron. You can move this guy out of the way. There you go. So that's basically how that works. And you can see the line of sight is kind of taking its shape. So when you walk through here, it follows the player. And then there's shadows from outside from the sun, or sundown in this case. You notice I don't have line of sight over here. So I could put some on this cart since it's really not going to be moving. Could have done that also. So it just depends on what you want to do. So this is some of the things that you're going to get with the Meanders 5. If you've already invested in it in the Kickstarter. But later on, I'm sure he'll make that available on a store. I put the links to it in the description. I also put in the link for this module that has all these orc, different tribe members and different types of goblinkin. And then if you wanted to switch out tokens, let's say you didn't like the pogs or the tokens that are in there, you can go to your encounter itself. So if I bring up the main encounter, the generator, I can swap these out for whatever tokens I want. So if I unlock this, I go to my assets, I can look at my tokens folder. In this case, these are going to be in my data folder because they're on the top level. And then I have a folder called Goblinkin. These are from Bernardo Hasselman. So he's got some goblins in here. And here's an orc. There's another orc and another orc. So this is an orc mace shield. So this would probably be the warriors, or the soldiers. So I'll take and drag and drop that onto here, and that changes that. Then there's an orc caster, but this great axe one will be the berserker. And then you have this is an orc minion with a shield and an axe. So maybe I'll make that the commander. So you get the idea that you can swap out your tokens as you need to. You don't have to use the default ones. And here's an ogre that's carrying a war machine. So there's all kinds of things you can do to make this more interesting. So that's something you can do. And then when you generate this, it'll generate it with the new tokens. You don't have to replace the NPC token. You can just do it at the encounter level. That way you're not messing around with the higher level stuff. So there we go. I think that's just a nice little preview. So if I go back to the maps, I'll bring up the actual images and kind of take a look at those. So if I go to images, this is all the stuff you're going to get. So here's a burned village, which looks pretty cool. It looks like it's been attacked and rampaged by orcs. That's kind of cool. It's all burnt up. So it looks like a disaster. That's pretty cool. And some of these have the grids on them, some don't. So if you don't want to try to figure out what the grid is, you can put your own on. Let's see. I want to go back. I want to look at this is a large battlefield template. This is a really big image. I don't know if I'm going to open that, but these things are pretty good size. I mean, they're 8100 by 10,000. I mean, they're really big dimensionally. But this is a battlefield, basically. You could put a grid on it by... See, this is like a damage shield. So you can put this grid on here. Let's go with 100. See what that looks like. Yeah, it might be... It's about right. And then if you wanted to theme the grid a little bit more, you could change the color. So I think I'm going to go with the ground color here. Yeah, so it kind of blends in more. Yeah, it has more of a lighter effect to it. So yeah, there's battlefields. There's all kinds of cool assets in here. There's a cage. So whatever you need to do to supplement your games, there's a lot of options out there. Just remember that if you use third-party assets like this, it's going to add to the memory. So if you share a lot of content across the internet, it's going to cause some bandwidth issues if you use too much of it. The idea is to use the internal map tools for Fantasy Grounds, but you can use a combination of both. So if you wanted to use just like this barricade, and then you wanted to use Fantasy Grounds stuff, you could kind of mix and match. So it's up to you how you want to do this, but I really like this map set. It's pretty nice. I think Kris did a really good job. So anyways, that's the Map Meanders 5 preview. Hopefully that gives you some inspiration, a little bit of insight, a little bit of help on how to use it. Didn't really intend for it to be a tutorial, but I usually get into teaching mode. So I was hoping to help you out a little bit and then also kind of preview the content. So take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest